Good afternoon, good evening around the world, wherever you're calling in from, wherever you're zooming in from. Welcome to part 2 of America Made Easy. If you've been doing international business of any length of time, you've had the experience of entering a new market. And if you've done it for as long as I have, you've made a mistake or two, and I've certainly done that. And so our goal is always here at the Global Chamber to avoid as many of mistakes as we can, to work with professional people, to know about your market. And one of the things to know about is when you're entering a market, to do the legwork like we talked about in phase 1 of this conversation, and then how to validate that your plan is actually valid, and going to work. It's very important to go through that before you actually kind of go through the next steps. And as you're launching, how are you doing and making the adjustments along the way? And so we're going to be talking about that today with members of Global Chamber who are experts in this field. My name is Doug Brunke. I'm the founder and CEO of Global Chamber, and I'm very pleased to introduce Morgan Pierstorff, who's going to take us on this journey today. She's the Business Development and Sales Director at Newable Limited, and she's a partner with Newable-Avitus and Avitus Group, and we're really pleased to have you here today, Morgan. We're waiting and looking forward to learning more. Thanks for sharing, all of you.
Thanks very much for the very warm welcome, Doug. We're really excited to be partnering on this with the Global Chamber on this series for America Made Easy. Some of you would have joined us last week, and we have another one coming up tomorrow, all centered on how to really prepare for a U.S. expansion. So today, over the course of the series, we're really going to be sharing some valuable information from market experts, some people that you see appear on the screen now, and information on tools that are going to help you to land in the market, to expand, but also to streamline any existing business activity that you have. I think you're all tuning in because you know that America is a very complex market for many reasons, and our speakers are going to be exploring those. But there are certainly ways that you can approach it to make it a little bit easier, and that it's going to allow you to also mitigate risk. So this is really the goal for America Made Easy. It's brought to you by Newable-Avitus, which is a transatlantic joint venture. It's really meant to be connecting you with the local experts on the ground that are going to be able to support you across your investment journey into the US. So as a joint venture, we are specializing, and the speakers today are specializing in supporting small and medium-sized businesses. So certainly want to emphasize that. A little bit about the joint venture here for a moment. Our hub is in the Eastern Hemisphere, operating out of London in the UK. That's where I'm sitting today. We have speakers from all over, as you'll be seeing. We really help SMEs with the tools they need to scale globally, whether it be financing or workspaces or advice. But we also have a hub in the Western Hemisphere, which is out of Denver, Colorado. And that really is representing a team of over nearly 400 professionals that can help you minimize your overheads and scale quickly with a lot of different back office needs that we'll talk about today, as well as in the episode that we have tomorrow that's coming out. So we want to really be spending some time bringing in some partners to this conversation. We work with partners all the time, and you can see them up on the screen now. And they're going to be helping us provide a real holistic level of support throughout your investment journey. So we're going to be hearing from these partners today as we move from what was phase 1 market assessment, our previous webinar, into this second phase about validating your market assumptions and gaining traction from a business development perspective, which is of course so important. So I am going to be serving as the host for today. You've got a little bit view of the agenda that's up in front of you now. I'm going to be moderating a panel discussion at the end. So we'd really encourage you to send through questions, leveraging the chat feature today. So as you have a question at any point during the program, please send that through and we will address it at the end. So without further ado, I do want to introduce our first speaker that will be up today. That's going to be speaking on how to prepare and execute an effective partner search in the marketplace that's going to support your market entry strategy. And kicking us off for that discussion is Steve Lanier, who is President of America World Services. Steve has been actively working with European SMEs and other markets as well for over 20 years. And I'll just turn it over to Steve to talk a little bit more about his experience and the topic for today.
Great. Thanks, Morgan. And thanks, Doug, for organizing today. It's great to be part of the of the event. Very much excited, talking about more how to develop the US market. We're going to be looking more from the marketing side, and that's sort of our focus as a company. We can go to the next slide there, Morgan. Just a quick overview about what we're going to be talking about. And the next slide there, kind of looking at market preparation, but a quick overview about AWS. As Morgan mentioned, we've been around over 20 years, almost 25 years now. We work with SMEs to develop the US from a marketing standpoint, meaning that we help develop a strategy and identify partners and really develop sales for companies in the US. So I'm going to be sharing a little bit today about our experience and what do we do when we look for a partner for one of our clients. And we're going to go through a little bit step by step what we do. We started last week looking at sort of the some of the market research and what we do to prepare. This week now we're going to start to really look at how we do an actual partner search. So we can go to the next slide, Morgan. The first thing we say, tell your story. And again, it sounds kind of a little, okay, let's tell our story. But in the US, storytelling is extremely important. And if you're looking for a partner, telling your story is going to be very important when you meet or talk with the partner to present yourself to any company or any potential client or partner in the US. I think it's important for any market you're looking at, whether you're active there or you're new to the market. Storytelling is extremely important. And so one of the first things we do with our clients is to work with them to develop their story. And the story is quite simply everything that's unique about your company, about your products, and you put that into a package. And again, this seems like, okay, it seems very not so interesting. For us in the US, it's extremely important and extremely interesting to develop this story. The story can be anything from the history of the company, how it was founded. Was it founded by a family? It can be sort of the reason why it was started. Some of the best companies, they have their story sort of on the packaging in terms of how they were founded. It can be even association memberships, different certifications that you might have. Anything that really shows that we're credible, that we're different, that we're innovative, you put that into the story. And it takes some brainstorming to look at what the story might be. It's important to think about that, and your story changes over the years, and it changes from market to market. Your story in the US is different than your story in China or in Europe, and it'll evolve over time. So it's good to continue this process. We'll go to the next slide, if you would, Morgan. We also kind of look at who are your well-known clients. And I use the story of when I was in Washington. I went to a wine shop there a few years ago, and I was looking for a Côte d'Aron wine and something. And they said, well, here, take this wine. They served it at the White House. This was in the era of Obama. And I thought, okay, if it's good enough for Obama, it's good enough for me. So I took it. I didn't remember anything about the name of the wine. All I know was the White House wine. And I might go back there. I just say, I want the White House wine. And there you have it. That was the power of story in 2 words, White House. And that's the power of the story. If you can look at your market, if you look at who you're talking to, and then put your story together for that market, it can be very, very powerful. And that's why, again, last week we talked about some of the market, the research questions. What type of information do you want to look at? The information that you've gathered from some of that market research goes into developing your story. Last week, I used the case study of this blood testing company that did 5 tests in 1 machine. And very quickly, you may have heard this if you were part last week, but we found out that this was not so unique or not so interesting for some of the larger hospitals in the US that did 1 test in every building. So they said, we don't care if they do 5 tests. And so what we realized when we developed the story for this company, we had to do different stories. If it was a smaller clinic or a smaller hospital, 5 tests was very interesting. A larger hospital, not so interesting. So we had to adapt and adjust the story when we went out and talked to potential partners. So that research, again, guides your story. It helps you develop your story. And you might have a different story for different market segments, different sectors within the market. So that's something important. Depending on who you're talking to, you might present a different story. So then we'll go to the next slide there. So that brings us to the pitch. And again, for the US market, something extremely important. And the pitch is just your story in 30 seconds or even 20 seconds. Again, very important. And when we initially contact potential partners, or when you meet somebody at a trade show, or when you meet somebody at a conference, or when you're looking for a partner, we think that, especially in American, you have about 20 seconds to gain their attention, where they say, okay, I want to keep talking. And so when you meet someone, whether you're calling them, whether it's at a trade show, we say you have about 20 or 30 seconds. And what do? You give your pitch. And your pitch is just taking that story, putting it into the 20-second condensed version of all the most unique elements that are going to be interesting to the person that you're talking to. And when we do a partner search, oftentimes we will call potential partners and we will ask them, they say, what do you got? And again, we have 20 seconds to say, okay, this is what we have. They're doing this, it's family owned, we have this. And then they say, okay, send me information. So that's sort of the first, you have to gain their attention within 20 seconds. And then if they say, okay, send me information, you've made it through the first step of finding that, or perhaps having that as a partner. So we'll go to the next slide. And when you're sort of looking then, okay, send me some information, this is interesting, I'd like to hear more. Then we go into, all right, we have to send them a little bit of a sales presentation. And what we suggest to our clients, again, when you're looking at the US market, come up with something that's, we say, a 2-page teaser brochure. It teases someone. Doesn't have to be 2 pages, but we suggest not over 5 or 6 pages. Because when you send information to someone after you have a first conversation with them, you have then maybe not 30 seconds, but you may have 2 minutes when they look at your email, maybe 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes. And so that if they open up your brochure, they don't always do that. You have to have all the important information in the very beginning, the first 2 or 3 slides, again, telling your story, showing what's unique, showing what you have to offer. And then they'll take a look and they say, okay, this does look interesting. So we say Americans are like little children. And I can say that because I'm an American. And attention span is very limited. And someone says, oh, okay, this is really interesting. And then they kind of wander off and they wander away. And so when you have somebody like that, and American stereotype is that many of us are like that, which means you have to grab their attention with your pitch, with your story, send a presentation that again is going to grab their attention with all the information in the first few pages, and then they're going to want to continue talking. So beginning, you have 20 seconds, then that increases maybe to 1 minute or 2. That's the way you think in the beginning when you're talking to American partners or American clients. So that's what we say, have a short presentation that tells the pitch. The next important thing, and we'll go to the next slide if we would, we talk about the marketing plan. And here again, this is not so much about grabbing attention, but this is about showing a potential partner how you're going to support them, and showing this potential partner how you're going to make money. Last week, if you were part of that, Tom mentioned, it's all about how do you make money with your partner? And that's true. For an American, time is money. We want to make money. So developing a preliminary marketing plan shows the potential partner that you're going to support them, that you're serious, and it shows sort of how can they make money? How are we going to make money together? And that's one of the questions that we find from a potential partner. One of the first questions is, what's your plan? What are you going to do? What's your plan? And so we say, okay, you have to come up with a preliminary plan, because it's going to change with their input. But you develop this, it gives you credibility, it shows you're serious, shows how you're going to support the partner, and it can, again, increase your chances of finding a partner when they realize that you've done some research, that you've come up with a plan. So very important as well. So go to the next slide, please, with that. And there's two different types of plans typically that we develop with our clients. When we develop a preliminary marketing plan, there's the sort of the short version and there's the long version. And the scenario, which is scenario one, which is sort of the short version, we talk about sort of what do you expect to sell? Are you going to do $100,000 in the US in 5 years? Are you going to do $10 million in the US in 5 years? What do you think you can sell? Of course, importers like to hear that you're going to do a lot. If you can do millions and millions, they like to hear that because they're more interested, then they can make more money. But then you have to kind of show how you're going to reach that target. So you have to talk a little bit as well. We suggest to talk about the target market in terms of who you're targeting. If you're a B2C company or if you're a B2B company, how are you going to reach them? Do you have a social media plan in place? Do you have a digital marketing plan in place? Talk a little bit about how you're going to reach your audience, and then talk about your budget. I have to say, many of our clients, they have zero budget. That's okay, but you still talk about what you're going to do, and there's ways to sort of put together a budget that shows you have something there that you can, you're going to work with, and you're going to, again, support your client. So this is what we suggest to do. Put some ideas together, talk about some of these things, put this into a little document that you can send to a potential partner to show them that you're serious and that you're going to support them. We have a lot of clients that say, look, it's difficult to really develop a new area for our partner. So we want to be supported. This shows a potential partner that you're going to support them. So we'll go on to the next slide there. Then we have sort of the scenario two, which is the long version. And there you have something that's more detailed, more in depth. The forecasting is more 5 or 10 years out. Then you probably do need to have a real spend in terms of what you're going to do for your marketing budget. And it's something that we don't do for all of our clients, but for certain of our clients that are targeting larger potential partners, it's very important. I talk about one of our clients was a French cider company. They made apple cider. It was alcoholic. They did actually both. They were a very large producer. And they said, you know, Steve, we want to target larger distributors in the US because we're a big company. We work in 40 countries around the world. We export all over. And we said, okay, we can target some of these larger companies, but you have to be prepared. You have to come up with your marketing plan. You have to have your forecast. You have to have, they said, yeah, you know, don't worry. We know we export to 50 countries, 40 countries. We've been around a long time. You know, we know we're ready. We said, okay. So we organized a meeting for them, a meeting with one of a larger distributor. They were probably about 300 million in revenue, maybe 400 million in revenue. Arizona Iced Tea was one of their clients. And so we organized a meeting with this distributor. And we also organized some meetings with some mid-sized companies. And the client came out of the meeting and they said, we were very surprised. We said, well, what happened? They said they didn't want to taste our cider. All they wanted to see was our 10-year marketing plan and our marketing spend for the 10 years, how much we were going to spend. And we said, well, that shouldn't surprise you. That's when you work with the big guys, that's what you have to do. It's all about the numbers. They don't really care about your cider. They want to know how they're going to make money. So you have to come in with a plan that shows that you're ready, you're serious, you're going to spend money, you're going to make money for them, and together you can do something. But the larger the company that you're targeting as a potential partner, the more detailed and more in depth is your marketing plan. So again, most of our clients aren't going to that level. Some of them are, but it's something to consider and something important to look at. So we can go to the next slide there. So that's sort of what we look at. And then this is kind of the 10-year marketing plan that we kind of develop with our clients. We look at each different area and put some numbers behind it and what we think our revenue will be. So a little complicated, not for everybody, but something important to look at. So that's sort of what we say is what we look at. Let me go to the final slide. So again, this is sort of the preparation of looking at our activities. So we'll go there, moving on to Tom. So we say that this is something important, not something that's required at all, but we suggest if you can do more of these preparation activities, you're going to increase dramatically your chances of finding a partner starting to work in the US and moving forward. So that's the overview in terms of what we suggest as a pre-prep plan. Next week, I'll talk a little bit more about moving further and looking for a partner. And with that, we can move forward, and we'll hear from Tom for the next phase and turn it back to you, Morgan.
Thanks very much, Steve. We appreciate that. And to our audience, as you identify partners that you want to work with in the market, there are important considerations from an acquisition and/or a contract negotiation perspective. So for this topic, I'm very pleased to introduce Tom Torelli to speak to us. Tom has over 30 years of experience working with small to mid-sized European companies and from further afoot as well, helping them to minimize their legal risk when doing business in the US. His Chicago-based firm combines a broad range of expertise across many different services, all focused on helping SMEs enter the US market. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Tom.
Thank you very much, Morgan, and hello, everybody. Hopefully you're back from last week thinking that we provided you with some interesting information. In the 12 to 15 minutes I have here, obviously I can't talk in depth about acquisitions or contract negotiations, but I can give you a feeling for the whole area of contract negotiations with Americans. First of all, if you recall from last week, we're a small Chicago-based law firm. We're 5 lawyers working with small to medium-sized foreign companies doing business in the United States, trying to help them minimize their exposure to legal risk before they do business here. The key thing is to understand to use an American lawyer in a preventive capacity before you do business in the United States, because that's the cheapest way to use lawyers in the United States. Trying to do business in the US without the help of an American lawyer is a mistake. You may think I'm just saying that in order to develop business, and of course I'd love to help you, but it really is the case. One of the things that we offer is an hour for free. If you want to talk about, your strategy for the US, how to minimize your legal risk, how to maintain control and flexibility over your relationships with your American partners, I'd be happy to set something up, a Zoom or a Teams call. Steve has mentioned a few times about Americans liking to make money, and that's true even of us lawyers. What's really important is during that 2-minute elevator pitch that Steve talked about is to show your American potential partner, whether it be a distributor, agent, customer, licensee, or otherwise, how they're going to make more money by doing business with you. Yes, you need a story. Absolutely. Americans love to hear a story, but it can't be too long. And you've got to very quickly convince them that they're going to make more money by doing business with you. You only have one chance to make a good first impression. And although Americans do appreciate persistence, namely coming back weeks later, months later, they appreciate that more so than many Europeans, for example, do. But still, you've got to make that very strong first impression. Morgan, can we see my first slide so I know what I'm supposed to talk about? All right, before I talk about contract negotiations, I have a couple of additional points that relate to contract negotiations. The first one is American enthusiasm. You all know Americans to generally be quite enthusiastic, positive, optimistic. Yes, we can. That may be outdated, but nonetheless, I think you understand what I'm saying. And as a result, when you speak with Americans about your products, your technology, they're almost bound to react in a very positive and enthusiastic way. And we know many companies that have been very disappointed in Americans because they thought that the Americans were super interested in their products and technology and then never did anything. Well, what's important to understand is that we are enthusiastic about everybody. It's part of selling ourselves. It's part of keeping the doors open with you for the future. And it's sort of ingrained in us from our childhood is to be optimistic and enthusiastic. So what you must be is be demanding with your American partners. Namely, ask them for a business plan, for a marketing plan. Obviously, if you're a small company talking to a major corporation, that might be a little bit surprising for them, but you need to know, what is your American partner going to do for you? There are too many foreign companies that hope that their American partners are going to do the work for them because the US is complex, it's far away, it's an entire continent. Better let the American partner do what they can do and we'll see what happens. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. You've got to put in the time and effort, and you've got to be demanding of your US partner to make sure that you know what it is that they're going to do for you. So that's the partner marketing plan. Knowledge is power. Talk to people like Steve and Kevin that's coming on so that you have a better understanding of the US market. Too many people think that by using Google search, et cetera, that they can understand the American market. Of course not. You can get a sort of a very, very superficial understanding of it, but you won't understand American purchasing habits, how the market is structured, et cetera, pricing, competitive balance, et cetera, et cetera. So it's crucial. You can't make mistakes. Small to medium-sized foreign companies can't afford to make a mistake when they do business in the US because it costs too much money to make mistakes. Choosing the wrong partner, having the wrong pricing structure, not adapting your product to the American market. All these things, they need to be taken care of. You can't do business in the United States the way you do business in your home country or even in your whole home region. So let's get now to contract negotiations. Well, first, you want to control the negotiations by taking responsibility to prepare the first draft of the agreement. This is perhaps the single most important message that I am providing you with today is if you want to have an agreement that protects your interests, you've got to take charge of preparing the first draft of the contract and have that contract prepared by an American lawyer. Yeah, but we're in Mexico and we feel more comfortable with Mexican law, and so we're going to try to force Mexican law on our American partner. Well, that's going to be extremely difficult to do, first of all, especially if your American partner has a lawyer, which almost everybody does in this country. They're going to refuse to accept any foreign law simply because they don't understand the foreign laws. And as a result, they are going to insist on American law applying to the contract. Well, that's a separate issue that we're going to talk about in a couple of minutes in specific provisions of a distribution agent license type of agreement. But the way to control the negotiations and to give yourself the best chance to have an equitable contract is to take responsibility to prepare the first draft. And it's not about saving money. For example, we prepare agent distribution agreements for $3,000. Some of you may feel, well, that sounds reasonable. Some of you may think that that's a lot of money. If you think that that's a lot of money, you're probably not ready for the US market, because that's a drop in the bucket of what it's going to take in order for you to be successful in the United States. And if a firm like ours does not save you a whole lot more than $3,000, we haven't done our job. So you've got to find somebody that's going to help you to prepare a contract that's going to protect your interests going forward. When you negotiate with Americans, please make sure that if you're going to give something up, like exclusivity or reduced pricing or holding the same price for more than 6 months or a year, make sure you get something in return. It's crucial, because if you don't, then they'll keep asking and you'll have to keep giving. So it's important to give yourself margin in negotiating room when you negotiate with an American partner. I'm from Sweden originally, and Swedes, they start their negotiations almost at the point that they're willing to do a deal. which is not a good idea when you do business with Americans, because Americans expect you to have margin to negotiate equitable terms. So if you start too close to what you're willing to accept, you're going to end up having to go further than you feel comfortable doing in order to do the deal. So start further away. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing immoral with that. And generally, you're not risking the relationship as long as the American partner is indeed keen on doing business with you. So let's talk about the contractual provisions that you want to make sure that you address. Again, these are contract terms that are relevant for distribution, agency, license, representation, reseller type agreements. And this is frequently the way that our clients start doing business in the United States. Long term, they generally have their own people on the ground in the United States, but often enough, they start with distributors or agents or licensees. So exclusivity. And I'm not going to have time to go through each one of these in detail at all. But what I want you to understand is don't give anybody exclusivity for the United States without knowing that they cover the entire United States. It just doesn't make sense. Well, we don't have time to we don't have time to, so we're going to give somebody that we don't know very well exclusive rights for the entire United States. They could mess things up. They could make mistakes. They could sell your products for the wrong application and your reputation be ruined forever. If you don't have time to pay attention to the US market, don't do business yet in the US until such time as you're ready. So our recommendation is to not grant exclusivity. Of course, this is a business issue rather than a legal issue, but it's also a legal issue. And our recommendation is exclusivity should be earned by your American partner, not granted. Also, some of you have products that may have applications in various industries. Well, if you're talking to a distributor that's in the automotive sector, but your product happens to also have application in the medical sector, then whatever you do, don't give them exclusivity over the whole country for your products. Give them exclusivity, maybe, keeping in mind that I don't think that's a particularly good idea, but only in the automotive sector so that you're able to find other distributors for other applications of your products. We have been contacted so many times by companies that have had to buy back the right to sell their products in a market that their distributor doesn't even know anything about. Isn't that silly? Well, if you allow your American partner to prepare the first draft of the contract and you're not thinking in these terms, you may end up giving up exclusive rights and having to buy back the right to sell your products to a market that the American doesn't treat. I've only got a couple of minutes left. Payment terms. Please make sure that your contracts include language that require you to receive payment by wire transfer within a certain number of days of the issuance of your invoice. That could save you thousands and thousands of dollars. Why? Because Americans love to write checks by hand. And if they write a check by hand and they send it to you in Malaysia, it'll take 10 days, 2 weeks to get to you. And then you'll take it to the bank and the bank will have to collect that money. And during that time, your customer could stop payment on that check. Please make sure you always get paid by wire transfer. And if you don't have that language in the contract, you leave open the prospect that your American customer writes you a check. Again, these are issues that need to be addressed up front in order to protect your interests going forward. Minimum sales. I think you understand that concept. 9 out of 10 contracts have terms that do not really require the American partner to achieve minimum sales. It's minimum purchases, it's sales objectives, et cetera, et cetera. There's got to be tight, very tight and specific language about achieving minimum sales in order to give you the right to terminate the contract. Intellectual property. Please make sure that you have taken steps before you get too far in negotiations to protect your intellectual property rights. We'd be delighted to have an offline conversation about protecting your trademarks, et cetera, et cetera. Insurance. This is one of the areas where we can help you save money by requiring that your American partner purchase insurance that protects both them and you against liability issues. Product liability, we're going to talk about that tomorrow, and I look forward to that. Term and termination. We recommend that contracts be for a short duration to start with as you get to know your partner, maximum of 2 years. First year for them to start marketing the product, second year for them to show that they're able to sell the product effectively. Governing law and dispute resolution, well, I'll pass on that and talk a little bit about that tomorrow because I see I'm running a little bit over time. Thank you so much, Morgan, and hope that was of value to you, folks.
Thank you very much, Tom. We certainly appreciate that, and quite a lot of food for thought on trying to set up your partnerships in the right way. But of course, reinforcing your partnerships in the US and your overall business development strategy is going to require a very well thought out digital marketing strategy that can really build trust and market leadership for your company. So to cover this topic, I'm going to welcome back Kevin O'Creagley to join us. Kevin has over 15 years in the enterprise and Fortune 100 space. He's worked with brands like L'Oreal, New York Life, Adobe, Under Armour. And right now he's specializing in transferring across the lessons learned from the big players in order to help SMEs build their brand, define their audience, and go to market. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Kevin. Thanks, Kevin.
Excellent. Thank you, Morgan. And just a quick check. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good, because we now have our official first glitch of the webinar series, which is my camera that was working right up until now is not turning on. So for some reason, we're going to have to go without seeing my wonderful face, which is, I'm sure everybody's going to be really disappointed about that. But nonetheless, I'll get going. So thank you very much. And really excited to start to talk about how we can deliver the type of experience that a US audience is really going to be excited about, and how do we do that, and what are some of those differences. So Morgan, go ahead and go to the next slide, my first bullet. And we really put trust and thought leadership and market leadership first with every type of marketing tactic that we want to do. And we believe that creating that type of emotional contact with the U.S. consumer is really the place that you want to be in, with your brand and with your product, and a lot of reasons that I'll kind of go over. And unfortunately, lacking visual effect, I'm going to simulate the attention span of the U.S. consumer when engaging in a typical digital strategy. But if you could hear this, it's the time between those two snaps is the amount of time that you have to convince and convert a US consumer across a digital campaign. That is an impossibly short amount of time, and it's kind of a sad commentary on US consumers, me being one of them, and me being right in there with that, and recognizing that I also have a short attention span. But it's because we are bombarded on a daily basis with all kinds of ads and offers. I think it's somewhere a couple 100,000 a day. And so as Steve was talking about before, he's exactly right about the story. You have to tell a story. You have to be compelling. You have to create the ultimate micro moment for your potential audience to want to consume what you have to say and start to go in your direction. And so given that time frame is so short, it's about somewhere between 2 to 8 seconds is the opportunity that we have. Obviously, you cannot tell your whole story, and you can't tell the entirety of what you're all about as an organization. So you have to start breaking it down. And that comes into knowing your audience, breaking that audience down into segments, really thinking about who you're talking to and why, and taking the time to do the research, look into your email lists, look into your customer databases, look into demographic information using Facebook and Google tools, and create very specific campaigns that tell that small slice of your story that is only relevant to that particular audience. And so the best way that I can describe this is, think of it like you're selling in person. So let's just take a generic example, like you own a pet store. And so you sell to all different types of pet owners of all different flavors. And someone comes in and they got two huge German Shepherds, like these very large, impressive dogs. And they come in and obviously they're looking for something having to do with their German Shepherds. You wouldn't say, "Hi, welcome to my pet store. Is there a way that I can help you?" And the same way you wouldn't say, "Welcome to my pet store. We have cat accessories, we have fish tanks." You're going to recognize, hey, they're here with two German Shepherds. I want to engage with them in a meaningful way and start to create this micro moment and relationship. So how do we do that? And so, a good salesperson would kind of dive right in and start to build that relationship. The same way if somebody walked in with, a nice furry set of kittens, or a goldfish in a bag, you're going to direct them differently and alter your story based on what you can surmise from them coming through the door. So the same applies to digital campaigns. Start to slice up your story and create a whole set of digital campaigns that are using demographic information and digital tools and all of the great tools in the marketing toolbox, and really refine those campaigns, whether they be on Instagram or Facebook or Google, whatever you're doing, directly to why this part of your story is relevant to that audience and what pain point does it solve. Let's go to the next bullet. And there's value in being a guide. So, and one of the questions that was asked in the chat was, do you always have to say that you're the best? Do you always have to say that you're the best product, you have the best customer service, you have the best X, Y, or Z? And everybody says that. And quite frankly, because everybody says it, everybody knows it's not true. And it's almost table stakes. Like the alternative to having the best customer service is, do you have the worst customer service? No, if you're in business, you have to have really good customer service. So you're probably not doing well, if you don't have those things in place already. So the US consumer really wants you to go far beyond that. And the US consumer wants something that's life-changing. So it's very difficult. I mean, you have to orient your story, your product, your service, and your entire pitch in order to tease at someone's kind of core need, understand what they're looking for, sometimes in tune what they're looking for before they even realize that they need it, and be able to be there with that right solution at the right time, and craft your language to specifically that niche audience. So you're really speaking directly to them. And so that has to do with the demographic information, maybe, gender, age, the type of product that they're looking at. Is it more a technical product? Is it more of a lifestyle product? And you really need to speak to them as if you are having that one-on-one conversation. Go ahead and go to the next bullet. And removing those barriers to entry. So, the US audience wants 2 clicks or less. And any more than that, and they're gone. So you could look at any type of abandoned cart data and see how many customers you can lose through a convoluted checkout process. And this also has to do with where you engage your audience. So if you are looking at digital tactics, know your audience. If this segment of your audience is spending a lot of time on Instagram, you better be on Instagram. Or if you're more of a B2B or technical type of an audience, and they're really living on LinkedIn and they're doing research, and it's more of that type of an audience, then you better be investing in LinkedIn, and you need to go where your audience is, right? Because if you don't, the US audience is not going to come to you. They expect you to meet them at their need where they're at, and if you don't, you'll really miss out on those large segments of that audience. Go ahead and go to the next slide there. So treating digital engagement like a handshake. So whether it's a Facebook ad, or Instagram ad, or even an organic post, this is really the new normal. And, I could talk for a long time on how, COVID has really given the US market a crash course on how to lead a digital life and how to do more with digital. And so your audience has now just opened up quite a bit of, people who are much more willing to do these digital transactions and want to engage over digital. And so you have to think of it like, this is now the new normal. This is now how we're going to be engaging with customers. And how do we take the brand promise? How do we take the excitement and the engagement of how you might talk to somebody in an elevator to convey the passion of your business and why you get up in the morning and why you do what you do? You have to convey that through digital. And so, look at your digital presence, be investing in blogging, be investing in telling your story, be honest and transparent, and make sure that you're reacting to all the reviews, all the feedback. Make sure that you're aware of and present on all the different chat engagements. So if there's Facebook chat, website chat, treat every one of those digital engagements as if you're meeting someone in person. That random message that you get at 2 o'clock in the morning through your Facebook Messenger could very well be a tremendous client that you'll have for years and years. And that's just how they want to engage, because that's what works best for them. You can go and go to the next slide. And with great power comes great responsibility. So never abuse your power or be opportunistic. And what I mean by that is, you may have a very large email database, a very large marketing list. And what you don't want to do is, you don't want to be sending out, the same monthly newsletter to everybody, and just blanket messaging your entire list. Or you don't want to just send out one offer to your entire list. And so that's more of kind of an abuse of the power that you have of that list. So always be thinking about how you can create as many different micro messages within your list-based marketing as possible, and how you can refine that so that particular customer is getting just the right message for their needs. And that you're able to tailor that. So you're treating the customer with respect, just like they were walking into your store, and you're recognizing the characteristics that they have when they were walking in, and conveying that same type of respect across digital. So and then the last one is always, always, always follow up. I can't tell you how many times this is left behind of someone just not paying attention to their Facebook chat and it goes unanswered, or not paying attention to their website chat, or not following up on reviews. It is the easiest thing you can do, and it shows your digital audience that you care. It shows that you are engaged, and it shows that if they have a problem and it's 2 o'clock in the morning on their couch, if they engage with you, you are more accessible to them, because they know that they're going to be followed up, because you're seeing how you do it with everyone else, because it's all public. So that is one of the easiest things to do and close the loop on, that you'll get a huge return on. So with that, thank you very much for the time. Hopefully that was valuable, and please ask any questions in the chat, and we'll get to them in the Q&A. Thank you, Morgan.
Yep, thanks very much, Kevin. We appreciate it. So thanks very much for that and your comments, as always. So complementing and really key to any digital strategy is, of course, on-the-ground resource to follow up and develop leads and business opportunities. So to speak further on this topic, I will now invite Frank Levine to join us. Frank brings to the table decades of international business experience, from living and working in over a dozen countries. He's also a US-UK dual national, which gives him quite a unique perspective from which to advise international clients on understanding and succeeding in the American market. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Frank.
Thank you very much, Morgan. Thanks. That's a very generous introduction. What I want to talk about is how we actually offer some really practical help in getting established in the United States. And let's start, if you like, as an initial building block in what Avitus has to offer in terms of its overall suite of services. We are and been in business close to 25 years. We offer a turnkey solution to companies coming into the United States, but at the same time, we are able to customize and finesse the needs of each client that wants a soft landing in the United States. We have an outsourced team of experts in the USA that can help you almost concierge your landing in the United States. we ensure that you're compliant, and we all of this is intended to de-risk, to lower the risk, make it easy for you to come in and out of the States and validate opportunities, which takes me to the next slide, which is really what this 10 minutes is really about, which is how does it work? How do you actually get into the States without betting the farm? How do you actually get into the States by getting boots on the ground, testing the way forward, picking up on some of the things that Steve and Tom were saying. You can get it terribly wrong. It's very expensive to make mistakes. So how do you actually tune your approach to actually be commercially aware, commercially savvy, at the same time be measured in the way that you go into the States in testing the various ways forward? So the market validation is what it says on the tin. It is about validating a market approach, validating a market entry approach. The full US expansion, we'll come onto that tomorrow, is a more expansive, literally more expansive approach, and talks about going forward in a different way with a more of a substantive investment. The market validation allows you to go forward with a person or persons on the ground that will actually for you demonstrate whether there's any actual traction there, any likelihood of an appeal in the market to what you're having to offer, be it a product or a service. So we go to the next slide. How do you test the market? Well, the market validation allows you to, working with us, to hire an individual to put that person on our books, but they actually are working with you. They're inspired by you every day of the week. You haven't got the distractions of a distributor having multiple lines of business to take care of, or an agent with the same possible ambiguities, or even a license agreement where you're one of a number of different lines of business. By using the market validation approach, we're able to reduce your overhead significantly, take away all the onerous regulatory burdens, but find a person or persons that can be placed in a market of your choice, based on the job profile of your choice, driven by what we're both looking for, which is results to validate, is this working out for you? Is it worth investing any more money? Or do we have to fine tune or even withdraw if this isn't working, which is another thing that one needs to consider in the realities of doing business. So what does it allow you to do? It allows you to explore the market, you gather intelligence. It allows you to look at the 4 Ps. Is your pricing right? Is your promotional approach right? Is your physical distribution right? Have you got the right person even on the ground? You can test the talent. Have we approached the market with the right person for you, which again is no mean feat. The right person can make a huge difference. And we have a very robust and talented recruitment team in an organization, and without overly egging our offering, and this is an important consideration. So, okay, you want to gather intelligence, you need the right person who's able to, with his own black book, reach out into the market and find the right sorts of avenues for you to develop your entry strategy, and has relationship with partners and potential suppliers and customers, which will build mutual credibility between you and the person you brought in to do your bidding for you. And this allows you at the same time, last but not least, again, touching on something which Kevin has touched on, indeed Steve too, for that matter, which is about building brand. It allows you to nuance the brand positioning, allows you to establish whether the digital strategy is working, allows you to experiment, to test, to pilot, to find out really whether is this all working or does it need a rethink. And it's a very inexpensive way of, from the ground up, with boots on the ground, very as an old-fashioned business manager, I'm very fond of folks on the ground who can do your bidding for you. So what is next? If I may go to the next slide. So the validation part is a flexible solution for gaining traction, and it allows you to put a US team on the ground, set up without having to set up an entity, without having to open a bank account. Instead you get a person dedicated to you, instead of a limited support that you might get from a contract or an agent or even a license agreement. This person is 100% inspired and dedicated to doing your business on your behalf. And this approach allows you to streamline your operations. You don't have to have a lot of back office services in set up. It's all about testing the market with an individual or individuals. And the cost of this is much less than making a significant mistake, having a person on the ground who's talking to potential customers, testing your marketing and sales methods, and getting immediate feedback, real-time feedback of whether is this working, without having to put in place the various legal structures, compliance structures, and indeed we take care of the payroll, the taxes, and even the insurances for, if it comes to workers' compensation, all those taken care of by us through the market validation pilot. Allows you to focus your energies on working with that lead person who's trying to build a market presence for you. Next slide, please. So the market validation provides, if you like, a very workmanlike approach. How does it work in essence? Well, you give us a job description of the type of person you're looking to recruit. We will find that person for you. It can be any part of the United States. We're state agnostic, we're industry agnostic, and we'll bring the person to you. We can either do a light touch or a heavier touch, and that could allow us to, if it's a light touch, we can bring a number of candidates for you to look at it in yourselves and judge if they're the right fit, or a more heavier touch would allow us to have the capacity to interview them on your behalf, do some background checks, and bring to you a short list of 4 or 6 candidates that you can then choose one that works best for you. So we assume if that person's put in place the tax liabilities, we manage all the HR resource tasks, if you like. We do the processing of the payroll, we handle the workers' comp, maintain the personal records, and there's no regular responsibility for the company. So again, this is a very effective way of getting into the USA, a very practical way. And it's a very low-cost way and a very de-risk way of building a market presence and establishing whether your product or service really has a viable opportunity in the United States. It's big enough for you to make those investments that you're going to need to make in due course. As Steve pointed out, it doesn't come cheap, and Tom said the same too. It's a serious investment. So the first steps like this are very practical and pragmatic, and is a way of testing the market with a very modest monthly fixed fee, which covers all our expenses. And of course you have the payroll to meet and some taxes, but you couldn't find a more inexpensive and lower risk way of establishing whether the US is for you. So next slide, please. So the validation path takes about 3 to 6 weeks. It's all very quite prompt. It's already quite real time. Based on giving us the job description, we work on that together. We'll then decide which region works best for you based on maybe where you've already got some business through an export relationship or already a distributor that's in place. We can build the US franchise that you're looking to establish around that marketplace that you already have. We can have it could be where the talent pool is. Wherever you decide to locate, we can draw the person out of that region for you. And the whole exercise in terms from end to end before the person is in the seat and up and running for you is 3 to 6 weeks. It's a very immediate process. At the end of the market validation, well, where do you go from here? Well, you've got 2 choices. We look to think that it will be a great success, and you can then expand. You can either go look for longer if you need to. It doesn't have to be 6 or 7 months. It could be longer, 12 months or more. But when you're ready, you can then go to the full expansion, which allows you to use our full suite of services, which has we have the ability to provide you some legal advice on entity formation, help you set up a bank account if needs be. Again, could provide excellent guidance on the regulatory and the compliance rules that need to be complied with. And we can help set up the entity, do the back office, the finance, the taxes, and all the accounting. So if you decide to go forward on the back of that success, which we hope you would do, that suite of services there for you to take a step-by-step approach to build out the operation, to build around the success of that person that was put in place to validate the market for you. If on the other hand, it doesn't go as you want, you can pull back, and there's no additional commitment. And that really captures, if you like, the market validation pilot. Thank you very much for your attention. I'd love to answer your questions. We'll do just as did Tom suggested. We're happy to talk to you privately for an hour without any obligation or longer, if that be the requirement. We'd be pleased to chat with anybody at your convenience. Thank you very much, Morgan.
Thanks very much, Frank. Appreciate those comments. I believe this now takes us on to our panel discussion. So I would welcome back now our speakers, Steve, Tom, Kevin, and Frank stay on as well. We have had some questions that have come through the chat, so I want to be sure we address those. So I'm just going to pull those up and have an initial look. One that had come through, yes, we will be sharing, of course, these slides and contact information in a follow-up email, so don't worry about that. But we did have a question about pitches. So I think this probably goes to you, Steve. And the question was, can effective pitches in the US, can they be different from launches into other markets, whether they be Canada, Mexico? So maybe they already have a pitch in one market. Do they really need to change that and update it? Could you speak a little bit to that?
Sure. Yeah, from our experience, it is important to change your story, change your pitch for the U.S. market and for every market. And that's where the research comes in. With some research, you can sort of know where the adjustment should be. Again, using sort of that blood machine company with the 5 tests and so on. In Europe, where their home market was, that was their main pitch. And they realized, okay, we need to change that for the US. And it is important. And again, I think your story evolves over time. As you start to get more feedback, markets change, consumers change, clients change, you might realize you need to evolve and revise your story again, even in the US market. So I think that's exactly right. Change your pitch, revise your pitch, and come in with something that's customized for the US. That would be our suggestion.
Thanks very much for that. Yeah, I think that a little bit of A/B testing there with your pitch through the different channels that Kevin talked about would likely be another tool to follow on with that. We also had another question that was posed. I guess this is really for anyone on the panel. Can any of the panelists speak to how to expand a service business versus a product business to the US? Should they have a different approach or the same approach? Tom, do you care to take a first stab at that from your perspective, from the legal perspective?
Thanks a lot, Morgan. That's a tough question for me. But yes, sure. Many of our clients are in the service business, consulting services, et cetera. These generally require more presence in the United States physically than a lot of the product-related sellers and clients of ours. As a result, to me, this generally entails a greater commitment in terms of time and effort in order to be successful in the US. Americans all want service. I think Kevin will echo that, and Steve and Frank as well. So having service is something that's crucial even when you're selling products. And that's one of the problems that many of our clients confront that are selling products or equipment, is having someone in the United States that is count-onable in order to provide the service. When you're a service company, it makes it that much more important to be present in the US. I think that's.
I think I can definitely echo that as well. And speaking from experience, we deploying our marketing services have that challenge as well. And when looking at coming to the US, especially, I think a lot of US consumers have their guard up for sure, because we are the target of so many fraudulent attacks on a daily basis, especially with services. So I think having, like as Tom was just saying, having that kind of US based presence of someone who's going to be here with a phone number here and some sort of a physical location, a real address. Believe me, people will Google Street View you. They will do some research. They will digitally stalk you, and they want to know that that you are who you say you are. So I think just recognizing that and kind of embracing it, I think would go a long way to kind of remove that barrier to entry and tell your story more effectively.
Mm-hmm. No,
And just a quick addition from the marketing side, if I may. I think also services credibility, as Tom and Kevin mentioned, extremely important. And so from a marketing standpoint, you have to think about how can you establish credibility with clients or partners when you're a service company. It's much difficult, it's more difficult. But tomorrow, to give a little pitch for tomorrow, I'll be talking about the channels to market. And there are some channels that are more interesting for service companies than others that give credibility and can build trust. So if you tune in tomorrow, you can hear more about how service companies can do that.
Thanks very much, Steve. We've had another question come through. This one, I think, for you, Frank, asking a little bit to explore the pivots that we kind of see from that market validation stage to kind of launching, and then where they take it, and maybe what we've seen in terms of success from companies. And I think building on that, also a question that I had for you was, how long does that validation stage normally last? So if you don't care to comment on that, please.
Yes, I'm pleased. Just to dial back to the previous discussion again and then go forward again, I think it's fair to say whether it's a service that you're offering or an intangible product or a tangible product, you can ordinarily, as a rule of thumb, assume that there's an intangible product service, the runway that you require to prove the concept is longer than a sort of fast-moving consumer good, but the very nature of the experience the consumer is getting, if it's a B2C play versus a business-to-business service play. That sort of feeds in, if you like, rather neatly into your question, which is how long does one need to validate? And I think it's fair to say, generally speaking, whatever length of time you thought it would take to validate your market entry strategy, you could probably double the time. And generally speaking, as a rule of thumb, it can often take 2 or 3 times as much money than you actually imagined at the outset. It isn't an inexpensive exercise. So the market validation pilot is a very neat way of minimizing the costs of, and allows you the flexibility to fine tune as you go forward the approach in terms of it, trying to sort of establish whether there's a market for the United States. So 6 to 12 months is not unreasonable. Any test market, if you're a large commercial company looking to test a new can of baked beans, would allow 1 or 2 years even to test the product. So 6 to 12 months is not unreasonable at all. What happens what is the encore? That's the other half of your question, Morgan. What do you do when it's all looking great and you want to go forward? Well, we'd be delighted to establish an entity. In fact, we really commend it, because an entity formation allows you to ring fence your revenues, your income into the United States, and doesn't lay you at risk of having your home market head office being approached by the IRS for taxable income from the US business. So entity formation for that alone is an extraordinarily important element, as it is to be seen to be in a US company by US consumers, because I think, as my other colleagues were saying, you need to look to be American to actually be seen to be American. That means having a presence in the ground with an entity, with all that goes with it, is crucial. And the last element is, how do you flesh all that out? Well, you will need in due course the ability to service payroll, have an HR capability, finance, accounting, tax, and so on, and other elements. And again, we'd be delighted to talk about how the fractional skills and competences we offer under all those headings are available to build out without huge investments, to take one step at a time to validate further what you found to be encouraging through perhaps hopefully the early test marketing through a pilot like we're offering, or any other mechanism for that matter.
Thanks, Frank. And we'll certainly be diving into a little bit more detail on those points that you just made tomorrow. But I think that touches on a question I wanted to raise to Kevin as well. I think, as people are thinking about channels and communicating with partners and building market leadership, they're thinking maybe we don't have the in-house skill set to, improve our website or social media. How can they leverage their existing team with other resource to be most effective? Could you speak to that, Kevin?
Yeah, that's a good question, and a bit of a tough question too, because I would tell you that there is a level of complexity and sophistication and just full transparency, not trying to sell or push services. I would say just be very very honest in your assessment of what your internal skill sets are, and don't try to oversell your capabilities. So know that it takes a team of individual specialists to really deploy an effective digital marketing campaign. And that goes from visual and creative to the story and copywriting and messaging. Then you get over into the technical to deployment of that, and getting kind of the e-commerce bits and all the ads deployed across all the different platforms. And then there's the data analytics side of understanding, are these working? Are these moving the needles that we thought they were? Are we achieving our goals, with these campaigns, and having the metrics in place and KPIs to do that? So I think it's just taking a hard look at the team that you have, giving it, and don't try to just say, hey, we'll study up or we'll learn. That would be like, asking me to just go install an electrical panel. It's not going to happen. I don't have that skill set. So I think just do an honest assessment of the team that you have in place, and then look for a fantastic partner, whether it be a marketing agency or a specific ad agency that can help out and fill those gaps. The one thing I will say, if you do want to invest in having somebody on your team on site from a marketing agency's perspective, is If that's going to be one person, have it be a communications manager or someone who is really gifted at articulating your products and your services, that knows the company top to bottom, that can really speak on the, whether it be the owner or leadership's behalf, to really communicate kind of that passion and why you do what you do, and have that person close to home. So you have that kind of boots on the ground, that real genuine type of credible messaging that then your partner can then go liaise with them, take that, and then go create the deployment plan. That's a pattern that we see be really successful in working with our clients.
Mm-hmm. Thanks very much for that, Kevin. It seems that the consensus here is that you've got to light a fire under your partners and you have to really push them to work for you. We haven't had any more questions come through the chat, and we are running a little bit short on time, so I think I'll leave it there for our panel. Thank you very much for joining us and speaking today. Certainly, we'll be providing the contact information for these individuals so that you can follow up with them, take them up on their offer of having an initial free one-on-one chat with you. So I want to certainly keep that in mind for everybody. I'd also like to say that, of course, we have the webinar coming up tomorrow, but another way that you can continue to stay engaged in this conversation, be a part of the conversation on these topics and many more, is to check out our America Made Easy podcast, which is available on all major podcast platforms, where we interview experts such as these and others on operational aspects of a U.S. expansion. Again, these slides are going to be shared, so you'll have all that contact information that you need to reach out to everybody. But finally, I really want to remind everyone to tune in to what is our third part of this series that'll be taking place tomorrow at the same time. But with that, I'd like to thank Doug and the Global Chamber team very much for having us for part 2. We're very excited to come back tomorrow and to share some additional details on a full U.S. expansion. But without further ado, I will turn it back over to you, Doug.
Awesome. Great job, Morgan. Really appreciate all the information. Thanks, Steve, Tom, Kevin, and Frank, for all of your information as well. If you are watching and you, for whatever reason, can't get a hold of someone, send an email to info@globalchamber.org and we'll find a way to connect you. Morgan mentioned about the program tomorrow. Definitely tune in, same time, same station. Everything is the same. There's also a blog post that captures the first session, including the video. So visit globalchamber.org/blog and you'll be able to see it. I believe it's the first one. It has links to that first program. It'll have links to both of the programs today and tomorrow. And it also has a link to the podcast that Morgan mentioned. We do events. And so in 8 hours today, we have our next event, which is virtual dining, Mexico style. So if you like Mexican food or you just want to learn more about doing business in Mexico with a lot of really interesting people in 8 hours, whether you're in the Americas for dinner or whether you're in Asia for breakfast or Australia for lunch, join us for that virtual dining in Mexico with a bunch of Global Tribe members. It's always enjoyable. And I gotta say, we've all been looking forward to the Mexico version. And I think it might be a little bit wild, a little exciting. So definitely join in. And then tomorrow we actually have 4 events. Besides this event, we follow that with an event with our meetup group in Tel Aviv, a meetup group with our members in Miami, and we have the International State of the Metro event being hosted by Global Chamber Denver. And then we have events on Friday, Saturday, next week, including Thanksgiving. So we never take a holiday. And despite all of that, the main thing we do isn't events. It's making connections within the trusted network. What these gentlemen and Morgan talked about today is all very important information, but all of us who have done international business know the devil is in the details. It is the framework. You should have a good framework and you should know who to reach out to, but where things go off the track or stay on the track are in the decisions all along the way. And so staying part of the global tribe, staying within the folks that have been through this before and getting their feedback, getting their knowledge, getting their information and their opinions is so critical to the success of anyone jumping over any border, whether you're going from one metro to another, or whether you're entering a new country, or including coming into the US, as we've been talking about. So again, thanks everybody. Have a great rest of your day, and see some of you in 8 hours for virtual global dining. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Doug.
Thanks so
Take
much.
care.
everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, Doug.
Bye.
Great job, everybody.